Mic check 1 2. Okay, welcome aboard, everybody. My name is Doobyis. This is a series I call Fly in Formation. It's a spin-off from a radio show and podcast that I do called After the Smoke is Clear, where every week I take independent new release music from across the country, put it together for an hour-long mix, and put that out to the world just kind of as a testament to what the scene was doing that week, because there's so much dope music that comes out every week. I've really been super impressed in the 4 years of doing the show. For this series, though, Fly in Formation, I've been talking to artists from coast to coast and really just trying to talk to people who make up the scenes, because I feel like there are a bunch of individual scenes across the country where everybody has their own fan bases that support them, but those fan bases might not really be aware of what's going on in the other cities across the country. So I just try to share the spotlight, point it out to each different city, and learn a little bit as I go about the artists and about the scene that they represent. So today, without further ado, I'm talking to Arlo Maverick. I'll get us both on screen here. There we go. So welcome aboard, man. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate you spending your time to come through. How you doing today? Nice, man. So you stay real busy out there, man. Like I am probably Canadian hip hop's biggest online, kind of always scrolling through different stories and feeds and stuff to keep up with different artists, and I definitely see you putting in a lot out there. Most recently, of course, you have just dropped a documentary about kind of the roots of the Edmonton hip hop scene, called The Untouchable Crew. Can I get you just to lead off by telling us a little bit about that? First, I just noticed in chat they told me, so I unmuted you halfway through what you were just finishing up saying there. But if we could just go back and get you to tell again what the entire documentary is about. The people in chat missed that, which is my bad. Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. Okay, so just to circle back, Untouchable Crew documentary is about the 1980s breakdance scene here in Edmonton, which focused on a crew called Untouchable Crew that was the who's who of breakdance at that time period. While it's not the inception of the breakdance scene, there is a previous generation, which is from the 70s, which was pretty much the hitmen, and they were more pop lockers. And so the Untouchable Crew formed after a competition where some of the members felt that they were unjustly robbed of a competition, and so that pretty much started that.
Right on. You said kind of it was about like rivalries with other cities too. Was it mainly Calgary, or like where were other crews coming in from to maintain a rivalry with early 80s breakdance crew in Edmonton?
It was from all across Canada, in addition to the US as well, too. There was crews coming from Chicago, coming from New York, coming from Vancouver, Calgary, Winnipeg. The Winnipeg crew is actually the catalyst that creates the Untouchable Crew, which is so interesting.
Man, that's really interesting, because you think about like now, hip hop seems to be on that international level where everybody can put their music out and you're kind of instantly in competition with everybody across the map. But like way back then, that means people were buying plane tickets and like flying out to competitions to be part of the culture, which, hats off to them. That's a lot of dedication, really, to something that's just kind of new and emerging into the cultural light at all.
Well, you have to keep in mind that it was possibly the biggest thing in the world at that time, which is why people felt it was going to be a fad, because just to give context in regards to it, the 1984 Olympics, Lionel Richie comes out performing, and he has breakdancers from Los Angeles because it was in LA. Right. And for most people, they're being introduced to hip hop and breakdancing for the first time ever. And so that helps kind of take it all over the world. In addition to Michael Jackson doing the moonwalk on Motown 25, these things end up exporting this culture, making everybody so fascinated by it. And luckily for us in Edmonton, because of the fact that we are a working class city, a lot of people were coming here to work. And as they were coming here to work, they were bringing cassettes, they were bringing VHS tapes, right. They were bringing ideas and bringing the news of this culture. And so it was able to spread. And so with that, competitions became very popular and people began to see that there was money to be made. So all of a sudden now you're flying in crews from all over the place to actually make these things where like literally these competitions would be packed, you know?
Right. So when I asked you about, again, you were muted there, but I asked you about kind of OGs and whether these guys were people who you knew from the scene as you were coming up. You mentioned one guy, Don
Joyce.
Don Joyce, right.
Yeah.
Was he actually a DJ at that roller rink you mentioned? I feel like I've heard stories of that roller rink from other people on this show.
Okay, so Sports World, oddly enough, Kaz Mega's dad was actually a DJ there.
Okay.
So he DJed there. I'm not sure if Don Joyce DJed there because Don would DJ at clubs. He would DJ on radio, but I'm not sure if he DJed at Sports World. I would imagine he probably would have, but I can't confirm though.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, man. So doing a film like that kind of that highlights the early history of it really you know, kind of shows that you think that it's important that the culture stays connected to the roots. Can you talk just about that a little bit?
Oh yeah, no, I think that's it's funny still because with the screening of the documentary, there was a lot of b-boys who came out to it who were honestly surprised by this history because no one had heard these stories before. And for them, a lot of them thought that, well, we thought we were the ones where everything began. And it was a real cool moment where for them to realize that, okay, there was a generation that came before us, and they could still actually connect with these guys and talk with them and ask them certain questions and get a better understanding of, okay, well, how does hip hop arrive here in Edmonton? Like, what were you guys doing at that time? So on and so forth. And to me, history is important. And part of the reason why history is important is because we need to know what was there before us. Also, you have to give people their flowers. You know, there's people who literally made it possible for us to be here on this podcast doing this because they were laying down the foundation many years ago. And so to me, I've always been very adamant about making sure that people's stories are documented and shared. Because if we don't, then history gets lost. And fortunately for me, I was able to contact all but 2 of the members of Untouchable Crew.
Dope, man. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said. It's among the reasons that I like doing this show, as well as, like I said in the intro, to kind of show people what's currently going on. Is, you know, this is going to be here forever. Anytime you're talking to a camera, that's going to be online forever. So you know, we're just kind of documenting as we go the hip hop scene or whatever. And you know, I appreciate everybody else out there who's trying to do that same thing, which is why I wanted to talk to you so much. Seeing you do that, and also just seeing you as a you know, not just a great MC in the community, but like, it used to be that emceeing was supposed to be a community member. You know, he was supposed to be somebody, or she was supposed to be somebody talking for a community of people. You know, and I think you are a good exemplification of that. So, you know, it's cool to see the Edmonton scene blow up and for you to stay at the forefront and still out there making moves. You know, I love to see it, man. I appreciate it a lot. Yeah. I heard you were working on kind of a series of these films though. Like, are you gonna actually do one for the 90s? I feel like I saw you mention that someplace. Yes.
Okay, so back in 2021, Natalie Meyer and I created a docuseries called Allow Me to Introduce. And basically what we're doing with that is that we're chronicling songs from hip hop artists from the city of Edmonton that were impactful for their careers, in addition to that artist in particular. So 2 of the episodes that have been released were Doom Squad, which looked at Lost in My Mind, in addition to Cadence Weapons' Oliver Square. And so through looking at these songs and like, okay, this was their breakout song, this was their breakout moment, but how did it help them out? But also, how did it help put the scene on and what was going on around that time that kind of helped create that moment? So looking back at those songs, like there's a lot of history. If anybody, the episodes are available online as well too, but looking at those episodes, you're able to see a lot of the history and certain things that have been when Doom Squad are talking about homegrown. That's something that if you're from Edmonton, you know that homegrown was a staple in the city for a number of years, but that's something that people of the generation coming up now may not be aware of, but it's good for them to know that, okay, well, on White Ave, just right below what's that, on 103rd or whatever, there was a hip hop spot where people can go to get their spray paint for them to do graph
Where Sonic
work.
worked there, right? That's
Yes.
yeah. Buy your bong, see
Yeah.
Sonic. Yeah.
Yeah. go and get lined up. Like it had everything, and it was like a center place for the culture for people to actually connect. And they did a lot of community work. They came out to a lot of events and really supported. So to kind of circle back to the that whole concept is that what I wanted to do was allow for snapshots of those time periods to be captured and preserved so that generations coming up can actually know, okay, what was that Edmonton hip hop like during this time period? Because I definitely we're exploring the 90s right now. There's a group called the Maximum Definitive that was essentially the first hip hop crew in Edmonton to really give us a national presence. They were nominated for a Juno Award in 1993 and won a Much Music Video Award in 1993 as well too. Nice. And these guys like paved the way for so many of us, and they're still involved with music still till today. Roger Moon King is now a chef as well too, celebrity chef. And Click is like pretty much everything under the sun when it comes to music in Canada. And Dart Malone is a dope producer that scouts talent, you know. So all of that history is connected to a city called Edmonton. And the more stories like that I could tell, then the more people from Edmonton don't feel the need to leave and go somewhere else and don't mind, or not even mind, don't just love saying that I am from Edmonton.
Well, and honestly, to represent Edmonton, it drives me crazy when I see people who have, listed in their bio that they're from Toronto, and I'm like, are you really from Toronto? Yeah. You're out here quite often, but no names or anything. But yeah, man, it made me wonder, even when you said their Maximum Definitive, that's a group name. Again, I've talked to some people about kind of the history of Edmonton hip hop or whatever, and I haven't heard that name thrown around a lot. Did they get out of Edmonton pretty quick?
Well, what's funny is that they were in Edmonton for quite some time. And the unfortunate thing about that time period, and this is something that will be explored in the documentary work that I plan to do, is that there was no support system for hip hop at that time period. You had radio stations that were saying no rap, no crap. You had like outside of hall parties and roller rinks or a few other venues, like there wasn't really a place for hip hop to actually like be supported. So you would eventually hit a ceiling and you would go on the road, come back, and it's just like, okay, you're coming back to the city where you're not getting that support. They weren't getting radio play outside of campus radio. And even at that time, it was very limited as far as what they could do. So they ended up moving to Toronto and the group disbanded. But it's one of those things where consider this, okay? 1991, the first Juno Award is given out for the rap category. By 1993, an Edmonton-based hip hop group is in the five slots for that category, right?
Yeah. Man.
They end up getting that nomination. Then they end up getting a Much Music Video Award for that music video. And there was no push from any industry people at that time to be like, Edmonton is doing something that is competing on a national level. We need to put more resources into it, whether it be grant funding or creating more opportunities to develop artists. Yeah. None of that was happening. In the interview that I did with the Maximum Definitive, they spoke about going and renting equipment to create a home studio in the early 90s. This is something that we as hip hop artists in many years to come would eventually start doing, but these guys were doing it from the 90s.
Yeah, it was pricier then. Yeah,
way pricier.
Before computers are what they are now. Yeah.
And they're sampling, they're producing, and creating music that is on par with what is happening in the U.S. at that time. Yeah. And yet there was no support. You had acts like Quick Trouble. You had acts like emcee. You had acts like Task Force. Like there was all these groups that were doing amazing things. Right. And for some reason, there was never that support. So the need to leave to go to a larger market, we saw a lot of that in the early 90s and throughout the whole 90s. But I think that the 2000s is when things begin to change because the internet changes things. Like people have the cost of manufacturing CDs comes down. So now you have guys like Orville who starts Tough House Records, and this dude is literally releasing like like albums from artists and going on the road and promoting this stuff and showing all of us that like this is more than possible. You can press a CD, you could host a CD release party, you could start up a hip hop label. Like all these things begin to inspire all of us because the technology begins to push Edmonton further up. And then you have studios like Smash Bands, you have studios like Dungeon, which was hosted by 118. And all of a sudden now there's like this whole cultural mecca. DJ NATO's coming in and like
and it starts to get some traction, right? And now, I mean, I make the argument all the time that I don't know if it's just because I lived there for almost 15 years or not, but like Edmonton to me has a lot of the dopest artists in the country in it, like
100%.
Probably disproportionate amount, you know, like I play a lot of them on ATSIC. I mean, Kaz was on Flying Formation last year saying like in his opinion Edmonton's the best in the country. That's the heart of hip hop. I don't know, probably misquoting him a little bit, but you know, I think I can stand behind a statement like that too, as much as anybody can stand behind a like best art statement. You know, it comes down to opinion or whatever. But so I did mean to ask you too, like in this documentary, like you've had a hand in doing the research and in actually talking to people. Like it sounds like you did interviews. You mentioned with Maximum Definitive you interviewed them. So was that your role in the documentary? Like I'm sure it was a whole team of people working on it, but what roles did you play actually in the Untouchable Crew documentary?
Okay, so we have a very small team. Majority of the work is tackled by myself and Natalie Meyer. And so, I'm typically the one who does the research, just coming up with the questions, directing and also editing for Untouchable Crew. I co-edited with RJ Kui, who is also a hip hop legend here in the city from Dark Sun Tribe, but has pivoted into film work. Typically it'll be me doing the research for something and coming up with the questions. And I think that's part of just the fact that I spent so many years in radio to the point that like I love doing these interviews and just sitting down and talking with people. Sometimes I feel that the people think that I ask too many questions, but then when they see the final product, they're just like, okay, it makes sense, you know?
Yeah, that'd be nice to be able to cut these interviews up or whatever. I'm having a lot of fun just in the podcast format because it gives me an excuse to like sit down and talk to dope artists for an hour and pick people's brains or whatever, right? So I'm just having fun hearing people drop gems or whatever. But one thing I have been asking everybody though, and you've kind of been already doing it for the last 20 minutes, is could you describe the Edmonton scene? Because I ask everybody just that point blank question, like, can you describe your scene, describe the hip hop scene there, and I guess since you've been around and involved in it, maybe can you contrast now compared to back then as far as shows going on? I heard you call actually the mid 2000s the golden era. I saw on social media or whatever that you called that the Edmonton golden era. And I mean, it feels like that to me, but that's because that was when I moved up there, right? So I've never known whether that's just my bias or not, but maybe talk a little bit about why you think that was the golden era.
Okay, the reason why is because when I think of the 90s, Edmonton has artists like Earl.com, has artists like this is back when Touch used to go by the name of the Mike Touch, and before that was Intellect, right? A crew that I belong to is called the Juveniles. Like, so there's a lot of cool things happening in the 90s. Whether you want to look at the early 90s towards the latter part of the 90s, Hyphonics, DGC, just a whole bunch of different things happening, right? But we're still trying to figure things out. We still don't know what we're doing, and we're all kind of just like shooting in the dark and hoping something happens, right? Yeah. But the reason why I would say that the mid 2000s is the golden era for Edmonton hip hop is that so many things begin to change during the mid 2000s. We have more radio shows that are actually dedicated to hip hop through CJSR. I had a show, DXL had a show, Mumps had a show, where in previous years you had TEDDY, sorry, Teddy. You had Underground Sound, you had DJ Tanner, so on and so forth.
Buffet was over there doing their thing.
Hip-Hop Buffet, that was 2000s as well too, right? Yeah. So what ends up happening is that in the 2000s, it's not just the culture is being shared and the culture is being cultivated through campus radio, but that's around the same time that we start seeing more hip hop artists from the city also getting on to rotation into a lot of these playlists, right? In addition to that, we also have stores that are coming into place, right? So Foosh, Colorblind, Homegrown, Solar. We also have a lot more events happening. We also have
I was just gonna say the arrival of the battle rap scene coming through.
Oh,
you know,
yeah,
blew up.
And
there was
there was a hunger in the 2000s that I don't think had been there since possibly the 90s or the early 90s. And granted, I was too young to know that time period, but the time period that I can speak to is a time period where whether it be DJs who are now coming out with mixtapes or people releasing albums, and we're now even the whole blog era where we start seeing artists from Edmonton beginning to appear on blogs and getting reviews, and like Caden Swept and what he did with Oliver Square and just breaking kayfabe. Like there's all these moments that are, and I think that in a way,
well, they made Caden Swept poet laureate sometime around then, didn't they? What year was that?
And that was around 2008, 2009.
Okay.
So like the 2000s was like, there's something to be said about the level of competition that was happening in the city. And RJ and I joke about this all the time in the sense that we both wanted to have the best group in the city, right? But you know what? Pete Game felt they had the best group in the city.
Everybody did, right?
Felt they held it, and all these acts are just pushing each other. It's like we're not in competition in the sense that we don't want to see people win. We're in competition in the sense of, wow, they did that, we need to do this. It just kept on pushing the scene. And it kept elevating the scene. And I think that competition was healthy because of what it ended up creating.
Did that but also keep the scene kind of segmented though? Like were people working with one another, or were people mostly staying in their little pockets? Because now, like, I just listened before the interview here, we played most of your last album from 2021, and like there's a pretty good representation of some MCs on there. Like I think I heard Deuce Fantastic on there, and
K Blitz is on there.
Blitz on there, yeah, right. Moraine on there too, but he's home camp, I guess. But it seems like a little bit more crossover is happening these days. You'll see different artists popping up on either each other's albums and singles and stuff like that. Was it like that back in the day?
I think it was. I don't think we took as much notice to that happening, but it was happening because even on when I look back at the first Politic Live album, we have Reason on there. Reason was part of Tough House Records, and he's a goat in the city. Like his first album, Letters on Paper, is like a classic to me that we don't talk about enough. Who else? Major B collaborated with him. Like there was collaborations happening, but I don't think that they. It's weird because, like, again, this is a time period where everybody was trying to be the best, and so people would collaborate more so on shows than on actual songs. But it was happening with songs as well too, though.
I was just thinking it wasn't file sharing era quite back then either, right? Like the internet wasn't what it is now, where you can collaborate on a song and nobody leaves their living room if people have a whole mic setup kind of deal.
And I think so, I don't mean to interrupt you there, but no. I think that's something that is lost in this current generation, is the whole fact that like going to shows and actually meeting people, because like outside of a few message boards that were popping at that time, like we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have Instagram, we didn't have Twitter, we didn't have all these social media sites. We had Nexopia, but no one really used that, right? MySpace was coming in towards the latter part of the No, it was there like halfway through, but people used it, but not to the extent that we use it now, because we didn't have smartphones. It was like you had a phone that basically could take a horrible picture, you sent it, and that was it.
You might look at your MySpace on your home PC or whatever for 10 minutes a day or whatever. But it's not like having it in your pocket all the time, right?
So,
for sure, man. So I know you have music coming up. I saw on your Instagram there you're promoting a single that drops Was it today? When does that drop? Two days
No,
from now? Very soon.
yes, Thursday. Yeah,
Thursday. Okay, yeah. But that was featuring Kaz Mega and Just Mo.
yeah.
Can you tell us about that single?
Okay, so the thing is called Night Shift, and it's a song where we basically just look at some of the like joys of working night shift. I think that being in this province, everybody at some point in time has worked a job in which they has bled into the night shift, and sometimes it's been graveyard shift, sometimes it's been just working until maybe 11 or midnight, whatever the case may be. But a lot of us have had to work those night shifts where we are away from our family, we're not doing the things we want to do, we're tired at work, and we're doing all these things to stay awake while we're at work. It's not really healthy, but it's part of living in Alberta.
It's the grind. That's the definition
it's the grind,
of it.
you know? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, man. So who is Just Mo? I haven't heard that name before.
Okay, so Just Mo is it's interesting because I shared a clip of us in the studio because Natalie Meyer like documented the whole like recording process for this new project I'm working on. And in one of the scenes that I posted a clip from, I'm talking about how I was introduced to Mo. So there is I guess you could call them like a collective called Ego, which is an acronym for Edmonton Goes Off. And in 2020 or 2021, they had this whole idea to create this online magazine that would be centered on Instagram. And with that, they would release photos of an artist, interviews with an artist, and then a performance with an artist. And so the guys had hit me up early and said, "Hey, we'd love for you to be a part of this, so on and so forth." And so really, I took a liking to the guys, Tom and Dave. Dave is someone who I've known for a number of years. David McDowell, and so as this thing begins to roll out, I'm watching each one of these episodes, listening to the interviews because like I'm just intrigued by the whole idea of what these guys are doing. And I come across this artist by the name of Just Mo, and I'm just like, yo, this guy's like pretty nice still. Watch his interviews, I'm just like, yo, this dude's dope. So I go to connect to this guy and all of a sudden realize this guy had sent me a friend request and had also sent me a message saying, yo, dude, like, appreciate what you do, man. You're one of the OGs, got nothing but love for you. I'm just like, oh, wow. I've had this guy possibly like waiting for how many months because
just forgot to reply or whatever. Yeah, didn't see.
It wasn't even that. Like if I don't recognize someone's picture or if the picture doesn't look like it's a real person,
Yeah.
I won't accept it because I'm just like, this could be spam. I'm not trying to get my account hacked. So then reach out to him. I'm like, yo, dude, nothing but love what you're doing. Would love to collaborate at some point in time. And he was in Montreal at the time. And so he connected back with me. He's like, yeah, don't stress it, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, cool. When you come back in the city, let's figure out.
Okay, so he is Edmonton. He is Edmonton based then, eh?
Yes. He is, yeah.
Okay, dope. Sorry, the connection here
is Edmonton.
Connection's getting a little choppy. I hope everything's okay. Is it okay on your end there?
Okay, it just said my internet connection is unstable, but is it good now?
Now you're back. Yeah, seems like we're good now. Yeah, okay. Cool, man.
All right.
So you said there earlier you were talking about how the new generation doesn't have that handshake element going on, and it's because it's been replaced by what you just described with Just Mo about, you know, how easy it is to reach out and connect with artists online. Yeah. Something I've always said, like, is that it almost seems to me like the artists who really kind of like make it or like get more of a spotlight, I don't know if it's necessarily based on like talent as much as just being in the right place at the right time with the right grind, shaking the right hands, and meeting the right people and conducting themselves in a professional way where, you know, they're the ones who get the slots because they're asking for them, or they get the grants because they're applying for them, or those kind of things, man. Like but one thing I've been meaning to ask artists, and especially people like you who kind of have worked with a lot of different artists and even mentored artists, I would say, is like, what's a trait that you see in successful artists, like, or what are some traits that you see in successful artists? What helps make a successful artist out here?
I think I think it'll vary, but you do find some consistency is one thing, right? And the willingness to do the work. I know that's a term that's thrown around a lot. Do the work, do the work.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like when you consider the amount of heavy lifting that has to be done on the part of the artist before a label or anybody else comes in to help you out, like talent is there, but there's a lot of people who are talented, but they don't want to do the work. And so
Yeah.
their talent sits there because they're just like, well, someone's supposed to come in and do this for me. And it's like, in the day and age that we're in right now, the whole fact that you can create something and get it to a point where it is now a product or a service that could be negotiated,
Yeah.
and you could have bargaining power. I don't see why artists wouldn't do that, because I'm Prince, for example, if he had the opportunity to have the resources that we have now and his talent and his work ethic, would have completely controlled the music industry, you know?
Yeah, it would be a changed
And
environment for sure. Yeah.
completely. So yeah, I think just being consistent and willing to do the work. And uh it's not as much now, but I think that it is going to kind of come back into place again as well too, is your live show.
Yeah.
I think that the I always have these arguments with people, sometimes heated debates with people in regards to like the importance of building a great live show, because at the end of the day, like that's where your fans get to see your music in person.
Yeah.
That experience goes a long way. And if your show is sloppy, if your show is not tight, if you're not giving them high entertainment value, then they're not gonna, and making that connection as well too. It can't just be this production where you don't make that connection with them. One of the crews I've seen do this extremely well is Doom Squad. Like
Yeah.
these guys understand putting on a great show, but then connecting with their fans afterwards. And we are in a day and age where the whole mystique and facade of certain artists, like Michael Jackson didn't have to go in and talk to his fans, but guess what? The artists nowadays do, right?
Yeah.
And that's because the machine that was behind him made him into this thing that people like wanted to adore from a distance. But nowadays, if you're actually connecting with your fans and building that relationship, then it goes a long way. And I think that more artists need to be cognizant of that, as opposed to approaching it from the standpoint of, well, I'm the artist and they're supposed to see me as an artist. It's like, no, they want to see you as a person. They want to see you as someone they can relate to.
Definitely.
You know?
They want to see the behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
Which is
And to an extent, like obviously there has to be some sort of privacy there, because sometimes people want to know too much, right?
Sure, yeah. But I mean, you mentioned though that you had your new album, the recording process was documented, right? That you said you had somebody in there videotaping it. And I mean, like here on Twitch, I've messed around just like writing and recording in my home booth here, just live on stream or whatever. And you know, it's a 4-hour stream where I might write half a song and record half a song or whatever. But like I like it because it keeps me on point. It keeps me from drifting off. Like I know there's a camera pointed at me, whether anybody's actually even in chat watching it or not. I know that I have to be sitting writing that song. I'm going to start applying myself to it, right? Which there's so many distractions in the world. Otherwise, sometimes it becomes tough or whatever. But what was your experience like with having the creative process documented like that? Because I know some guys don't like it. Like I've had other people come to record here and they're like, no, cut the cameras off. I don't want cameras in the mic booth while I'm in here fucking around.
Okay, so I've been fortunate enough to have every album that I've worked on from notoriety documented in some sort of fashion, right? Whether it's having a crew come into film or just setting up a camera to then document that. So for me, like I'm able to be in the moment and not perform to the camera. And it's a conversation I have with people all the time, in the sense of like, you have to be able to know the camera's there, but still be who you are. Because sometimes when the camera's on, people start performing to that camera as opposed to doing what they're supposed to do. And that camera is literally supposed to be a fly on the wall, capturing that moment. But if you're now doing things that are okay, well, I've got to perform for the camera and I've got to do this, I got to be funny, it's just like, no, just like do what you do, but allow for the process to be documented.
I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there who have a lot of documented footage that will never hit the light of day, and it makes me sad. I mentioned in an interview, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, that I saw a different, kind of hip hop podcast person being like, if there's an event, I'm going to be there and I'm going to be taping, but if I'm not being paid, I'm just going to put it on my hard drive. And I was like, I shed a single tear that day, because it's like, you share it with the world. Like, it doesn't cost anything to post up or whatever, but yeah, I guess different mentalities or whatever, right? But dude, I want to get back to the album that you were telling me is coming up. We talked about the single. What's the name of the album? What can people look for from the album?
Blue Collar. I think this is actually the first time I'm actually talking about it, so you're getting like the goodies.
Exclusives. Good.
Yeah, no, it's called Blue Collar. I won't announce the date just for the fact that I think my publicist would rather wait for me to announce that too. But yeah, no, the album's called Blue Collar, and it basically just looks at I liken it to College Dropout, and I'm not saying that I'm Kanye level, but I liken it to College Dropout because I feel that when the College Dropout came out, there was nothing in the zeitgeist at that time that actually spoke towards the challenges and the ups and downs and the full totality of being a college student, dealing with the fact of like, yo, like I've got all this debt, but I need to get this degree because my parents are depending on me or everyone's looking at me. Yeah. And I'm working at the Gap, Yeah. And I want
other than Kanye, it was, 50 Cent and a lot of thug music going on at the time for sure.
100%, so I feel that with Blue Collar right now, like we are in a time period where the conversations that should be had around working, the conversations that should be had around our disdain for what's going on within the society as far as like hypercapitalism and having to work these jobs that we're not getting paid what we should get paid, so on and so forth. But then we also play into it by also consuming things that we don't need, but and even the whole education system, like in the sense of you go to school to get an education, but then when you come out, you're not working in that field and you're working at another job and you're trying to pay off. Under questioning that. So a lot of those conversations are ones that I feel that hip hop has the ability to make them more accessible and something that people don't feel uncomfortable talking about, because if you're at work, you'll have those conversations maybe during the smoke break or whatever the case may be. But hip hop used to be that thing that used to say, here's this thing, let's make this a cool thing to talk about. And when you think about, again, going back to College Dropout, like, or even like what J. Cole did when he came out with this mixtape series, like he was talking about debt in a way that people could relate to, in a way that was cool and humorous at the same time. But it wasn't corny, And so I think that I've been able to do so with this new project, and the team that I assembled is an amazing team. I had Kaz Mega as one of the producers. I also had Kaz Mega as like I guess you'd call him my rap coach during the whole thing, like just critiquing bars and like making sure everything like got beaten up, Uzi Law, who was doing the same thing, just helping me with my flow and everything like that. And Aristotle Kanga, who's not really known in the hip hop space. He predominantly works with Two Moods, who's a francophone hip hop artist, but the way his mind works as far as producing is one in which I wish more hip hop artists had access to, as well too. Cameron Brown, Enoch Addy. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody. No, I've covered everybody who's part of the production team for it. So yeah, I was able to.
You got me right on board, man. That all that talk about societal issues being brought to the forefront and hip hop being a useful tool in doing that and getting people to think about that. To me, that's the epitome of what people should be doing with the art. I mean, tough to say what 100%. People should do with their art, but that's what I try to do with mine anyways, or whatever. But yeah, dude, can I ask you more about this album, or you want to keep a lid on it? Like, can I ask about like who did the beats and stuff like that? You said Kaz Mega was some of the production.
Kaz, he okay, so I'll touch on it a bit, but I don't want to go too deep into it because but Kaz Kaz has always been critical of my drums. Okay, so any producer that I've ever worked with, Kaz has been like, "Yo, drums aren't knocking, drums aren't knocking." So with this project here, he was brought in specifically to help with the drums, but then he kind of took on a few more roles and really helped give the album the shape that it needs. So he's one of the producers who was on there, and yeah, just if you know Kaz, you know that he's a hip hop purist, you know, but he also
He's not going to bite his tongue for you. That guy will tell you what he thinks for sure.
Very outspoken. But he also has, because of the work that he does within the community, working with a lot of the youth that are coming up now, he also has his ear to the streets in regards to what's happening in the current marketplace, and is able to create that balance between the old school and the new school, which I think is something that not everyone's able to do in a way that is as with as much finesse, I should say.
Yeah,
you know,
that's a good way to put it for sure. So just kind of, can I ask how long you worked on this album for? Like, I also wanted to ask you, like, how long do you plan releases for? Like, you seem like a guy who's well planned out on this, so those kind of go together.
Yeah. Okay. So to give you context, the last full-length album that I did, Maybe Tomorrow, was dropped in 2016. I know it's been a while, but I do take time to create projects. That one that we started working on in 2013, we wrapped it up in late 2014, and it was roughly about a year of preparation in regards to the marketing, accessing grants, shooting music videos. And that one there was a little bit more involved because of the fact that it was I called it a multi-platform narrative, right? So I had music videos, I had short films, I had vignettes, I had artwork. Everything was all working to tell this overall story,
Right.
you know, in addition to the actual music from the album. And so with that one there, we had begun the marketing campaign, or began putting together the marketing campaign, like from roughly about a year before the album actually dropped, you know, maybe even a little bit longer. And so fast forward to now, Blue Collar has been something that I've been toying with the idea from 2017, but it was just something that was in my head. Some ideas that I was writing down based off of like just certain things that were happening at work, and I'm just listening to all these conversations of like, yo, like that should be a song, you know?
Everybody's going broke. Those are the conversations I hear at work anyway. Yeah.
And then so when was it? 2021 is when I applied for a grant that ended up helping fund a lot of the initiatives for the project. And so, so we spent I would say close to, because there was a lot of like up and down, especially during the pandemic, that impacted the project in a major way, in the sense of us not being able to meet, or people being sick. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we got to do Zoom, like just all these things happening all at once, and everyone not knowing like, well, what's protocol, what's, you know? And so, yeah.
Right on, man. So were you working like with a band on this one? I know you often work with bands. Was there a lot of live instrumentation involved in the production of it then?
Not as much as in previous years. We did have a horn section on one of the tracks, and we were looking at live drums, and we actually tracked live drums, but then those tracks didn't end up making the project. So there's live bass, live guitar, but not as extensive as maybe a Mahogany Public project like that we released back in 2009, or Ellipsis, or even Adaptation, which was probably the most musical one that we had, but still had this boom bap sound to it, you know?
Yeah, word. So can you tell me a little bit about like how the songs actually come together when you're working with bands? I'm always fascinated when rappers are working with bands, because you know, so many MCs just like to have a beat and write to it or whatever. That are you having jam sessions where you're writing and the band is coming up with new ideas on like throughout the jam, or are things coming together piece by piece where you've written lyrics to something else and you come in and put it together that way?
It's a bit of both. And what's fascinating about my history or journey with bands is that it dates back to high school. There was a a friend I was in class with for drama, and he's just like, yeah, like you're rapping over these, like, and at that point in time, we're like rapping over like cassettes, you know. And he's like, well,
Pause
have you ever
tapes.
considered? Yeah,
Yeah.
he's like, have you ever considered a band? And like, he was a drummer, and he's just like, yeah, let's get together, let's do something. So we ended up playing like a talent show at school, and that was like the beginning of it, where it's just like, yo, this is kind of cool still. And like, so with them and like the whole journey afterwards is that like you'll get together. A lot of times I'll come with ideas. I'll be like, okay, I want something that kind of has this feel, so on and so forth. And the lyrics will already be, majority of the time, the lyrics will already be there, or we'll just jam and then just like be inspired by something, because the musicality that you get from playing with a band or jamming with a band can tend to come up with some real cool ideas. And in the beginning of this project, everything was jam sessions. I was very adamant that in order for us to be able to jive and gel together as a cohesive unit, we have to be able to be in a space where we're all just playing. I'll freestyle, Uzi will freestyle, whatever the case may be. You guys play, and let's let the music like take it to where it needs to be, because there's something to be said about that whole jam session that takes place when musicians are all in the same room, and the ideas that inspires. And what we would do is that those jam sessions would be created, ideas would come from that, and then I would then record that stuff, go home, start looking at certain parts. It's like, okay, all right, we could use this, we could use that, and then start coming up with different melodies for certain parts, coming up with different raps for certain parts, and then revisit the whole track again, and then say, okay, well, can we make this thing work within that, you know?
Nice.
And sometimes it would just be throwing, Kaz would come up with some drums, he'd have it on loop, and the guys would just start playing, and it's just like, okay, let's jam. It's just like, okay, cool, I like that idea, don't like that idea, so on and so forth. So they're organic, never is anything like really I like to be in the moment. So sometimes that can be a good thing, sometimes that can be a bad thing.
That sounds like it's probably the best way to write a song with a band, but it also sounds like it's probably the maybe not hardest way, but most time consuming way.
Yeah.
To start with a jam and nail it down to something that is a finished form based off of freestyles people have been kicking and improvised lines people have been playing. That's a lot, man. Yeah, that would be quite the process.
You would be surprised, because I'm not sure if I should even share this, but the chorus for Night Shift, anybody who's heard the clip, it goes, working at night shift, and I just want to go home. I just want to go home. What that originally was us just joking around in the studio saying, because the whole idea was that it was supposed to be a graveyard shift, right? So it was like, working at night shift, and I ain't afraid of no ghosts. I ain't afraid of no ghosts. And that was just like us just like fooling around in the studio. I'm just like, yo, let's
keep it,
you know,
somebody get in there and say that.
Yeah. So, you know, so it's like sometimes those random things that you say in the studio that just seem so trivial end up becoming like some really cool things, you know?
Yeah, so, magic happens like that. When artists are all in the same room, definitely you can get those magic moments like that where somebody says something, it's like, oh, we need that, do it. Can I ask, do you, when you're listening to hip hop, because you said, you know, live show is very important to you. When you're listening to other people's hip hop, do you prefer rap over top of bands? Do you prefer rap with like real layered instrumentation and stuff, or like do you listen to kind of boom bap and whatever other types of hip hop too? Just
no, I listen to it all, man. I listen to it all. Keep in mind that I grew up in an era where live instrumentation wasn't a thing. The Roots were like the first like hip hop band that we all can recall. There's probably other bands, but that was the first band that most of us can.
For sure,
you know. And even within our city, we had a band called City of Champs that had GUttA in it, Angeline Tedawayo, who's now at CBC, and Touch. And what they did like with their music was like it was still hip hop, because the drums would be programmed, and they were using like live samplers like in the moment. They'd use so they have the ASR10, right? And they'd be using that to create the drums or whatever. But then after they'd have a guitarist come in or a bass player come in and keyboardists come in to just do some stuff, but the drums always had to be hip hop. They had to be raw. They had to be dirty. So,
Yeah.
so for me, I have an appreciation for both because I love live music, but I know there are some artists that they can go out there. Like I've seen Busta Rhymes perform multiple times, and this dude here, I never seen him with a band, but that live show is like as if he had a live band because like the music, and I think this is where people sometimes don't understand hip hop because it's just like, okay, well, you're essentially rapping over the beat that we heard. And it's like, if that artist can then take that song to a whole new level to the point that elevated based off their energy, based off their interaction, creating that experience.
Well, and not only is Busta Rhymes like, you know, a ball of energy himself, like a you know, legendary stage show, but he also has one of the best hype men around too, right? Spliff Star. Yeah. So yeah, his stage show is definitely crazy, but yeah, man, I think that stage show is very important. I've always wondered, is it an Edmonton thing? Because I always looked around and was you know, half jealous of people with the big gigs because they're all playing with bands, right? Like you guys in Politic Live, you in Politic Live, and you know, just different people out there playing with bands or whatever. And I was always just like, oh man, like Edmonton's full of people who don't appreciate hip hop, you know, for the sampling. It's full of people who look at, you know, like you said, like, oh, none of that rap crap or whatever, right? And it's like people who think that if you're not playing a guitar, it's not music or whatever. So like, is it the cheat code to get a band in Alberta, like to get onto some of these stages? Is there something to that?
I don't. Okay, so and Kryple and I have these conversations all the time, just in regards to like certain organizations or entities do prefer that because we are in a province where they do respect live musicians or players more than they respect someone who comes in with a DJ, so on and so forth, right? But the thing with us as Politic Live is that we were able to acquire a lot of opportunities without a band. The whole band thing didn't come into place until our last album, and our last album was in 2012. And we had been able to get booked for multiple gigs, like in the city, even across Canada, with just having a DJ. You know, so I think that it's one of those things where it can seem like the cheat code, but I think that if you are able to bring a great live show, then that cheat code, like the next person might have a live band, but if they can't bring it like you do, then
well, it's maybe one part of a resume, right? Like it's not like it's going to be the be all end all. It might be one part of a resume that helps on certain, you know, when you're applying for certain things or whatever. But like you say, man, I don't mean to take away from your guys' musicality or anything else.
No, and I get that. What's fascinating though is that what people. So if you look at the history of Politic Live, our first album, Notoriety, drops, and with that, there were songs that had samples on there. And because we had friends who didn't necessarily understand hip hop culture, some of the samples that we were using, other producers, so the producers we worked with, some of them would be sampling stuff, and then all of a sudden someone would hear the same song and be like, yo, like you stole this song. And like we're just like, no, like it's hip hop, it's sampling.
How
people
this
didn't get it, you know? Yeah. And so we made a conscious decision moving forward from that project there, from Notoriety to Adaptation, that we were going to create hip hop music that didn't have samples but would feel like it had samples, right? So if you listen to a track like Dropping Gems, which has like a jazz but reggae type feel to it, like the way that Freddie B programmed that beat, it kind of feels like it has samples. And what we would do as well too is that we would sometimes produce something and then go back and sample it. So Enough, which was on Adaptation as well too, was a song where if you ever hear the original track that we had produced for it, it was something that was produced and then Freddie ended up sampling something from that and put it into that track there. So often we were sampling ourselves based off of ideas that we felt were good, but you know what, let's find a way to rework this, you know? And so as we move on, like, and once we get to Ellipsis, like there were people who thought that the horns on NYE were samples. but it was mixed in a way that we were able to bring in live like session musicians from the city, some of the greats from our
sample
city.
them. That's yeah.
No, we just kept it as is, but because of the fact that like no one, or at least not at that time, nobody would have paid money to actually have actual horn players. They would just be like, well, it's cost too much money, let me sample this. But we're like, we created the horn section. The parts were written, and we brought the guys in and like allowed them to create something that still was able to feel jazzy but still be hip hop at the same time, you know. And then so I hope
that
I'm
adds
making
so
sense.
much. Yeah, totally. That adds so much to a live show too. Like anytime I see a horn section on stage, it just blows me away. I'm a sucker for a horn section on stage for sure, man. But
yo, shouts out to Tariq, because Tariq's got a horn section on every one of his shows, you know,
yes.
Tactics, all them guys, you know.
Hell
so
yes, man. The Golden Eyes, right? That's the name of his band.
Yeah.
Or the band he's playing with, anyways. Not his band. He clarified that when he was on Fly in Formation. But, can I ask you though, man? Like you did say, kind of that you took feedback about your first album and really incorporated it into your sound from there out. Do you often think about what people want to hear when you're trying to write music? Like,
okay, so the feedback that we got, that kind of created the shift was more so we just didn't want anybody to have a sound that was like Paul DeGlatt. We wanted Paul DeGlatt to have a very distinct and unique sound, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes that would frustrate the producers that we worked with, because I don't understand music theory. So a lot of times I'm describing things to people in the sense of like a movie scene, you know. Right. Sometimes people just like, yo, what the hell is this guy talking about?
It's so
like,
tough to describe things if you don't have the terminology for it already built up. It drives me crazy when people are trying to ask me like, make my voice sound like this as I'm mixing for them, and it's like, there's no one knob I can turn that's gonna make you sound like that, man. But okay.
So because of that, we end up going into a direction where it's just like, okay, we want to create our own sound, something that is very unique to us. And so as we've released albums and gotten feedback, and what's interesting is that for adaptation, we ended up getting a lot of pushback from people saying it sounded there was enough boom bap, there was enough hip hop on it. And what's crazy about it is if you look at the track listing, there are 16 tracks on the project, and there are, I think, maybe 6 of them that had a reggae feel to it, and everyone felt that the whole album had too much reggae on there, right? So because of that, a lot of the critiques we got with that, we went back and made Ellipsis, and the original Ellipsis, we got feedback on that as well too. Like this is from like people like J Soul, people who we respect deeply within the music industry, and like they're like, ah, man, it's not what it needs to be. Like, and so we went back and reworked the project again and created something that a lot of people felt was like a masterpiece, like our crowning jewel as far as like our catalog goes. And so I do think it's important to hear other people's opinions and perspectives, because as the artist you're creating, but at the same time though, like there might be things that you're not aware of or not able to see because of the fact that you have tunnel vision with what you're trying to accomplish. And so I think that's where you have to be able to lean on a group of people that you trust their ears, you know? And since I pursued music as a solo artist, like whether it be on this new project coming up or on maybe tomorrow, like I've always tried to assemble a committee of people that I could say, okay, let me give them the music, and then before it comes out, and then get that feedback from them and see, okay, well, are there consistencies in regards to like certain things? Like one of the critiques that we had off of this new album, I'm not going to share, but there was a critique that was like very like something that I knew we should have done with the project, but just having a whole bunch of battles with it. And then after, when we got the feedback, I'm just like, no, we need to make this happen. And we made that change, and it actually improved the project. So I do think that when you are full. When you're operating in a silo, you end up missing the opportunity to allow other people to give you feedback that you could either take or you could dismiss, right? But I think it's worth hearing what someone else has to say, especially if it's someone who you trust.
Man, I always like to say, don't take criticism from people you wouldn't take advice from when it comes to your art, anyways. And that kind of is what you just said, boiled into one line, basically. That, like, some people's opinions do matter and can help the art get better, for sure. It just,
Oh,
you got to
100%.
choose which of the voices to listen to, for sure. Will we ever hear more music from Politic Live? You guys still working as a group?
Well, the thing with us is that we're family, so like we see each other at family gatherings all the time. And Gritty, I always try to bring him out at shows because like he still loves performing. Biggs is he's like really I guess navigating the entrepreneurship space. So like his focus is on building his business, so on and so forth right now. But like I love performing with them dudes, and I love like recording songs with them. Like I love writing songs with these guys, love being on the road with them because like it's literally like a brotherhood that we've had like since the time that we were like babies. So like
Good to
um
hear. So no specific plans,
yeah.
but in all likelihood, sometime down the road. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been thrown around still because even Kryple had reached out to us and been like, "Yo, like I'd love to produce like a Politic Live like EP. Like, can we make this
Yeah,
happen?" And
please
a
do.
lot of it'll eventually happen because at the end of the day, there's
I'm
it
talking
can't
to
just die.
Kryple next month. I'm gonna tell him to stay in your ear and make sure that happens, man.
And shouts out to Kryple, dope producer, man, dope
Hell
producer,
yeah, dope
dope
producer,
producer.
dope rapper. Yeah.
Yeah,
Can I ask you? So, what's your relationship with Alberta Music? Like, uh, I know that Alberta Music is a not-for-profit organization that helps artists
yeah,
across Alberta, get their careers in order or whatever, and maybe try to apply for grants, those kind of things. Are you
yeah.
full on associated with them? Do you like work for Alberta Music? Are you what?
No, okay, so in 2000 from 2008 to 2010 I was on their board, and so being on their board I was involved with different committees that they had, and part of the reason why I ended up joining the board is that I would, from let's say 2004 to 2008 or whatever, like I was in constant communication with them, letting them know, yo, this is going on in the hip hop scene, because I felt that the resources that they had were resources that the hip hop community needed to access. And a lot of artists didn't understand that. So I was like trying to create a bridge between both the community and that organization. And then they eventually said, hey, like you should just be on the board, So I came on board, I came and became part of the board. And during that time period, the 2 years, like there's a lot that I was able to do in the sense of like creating opportunities for hip hop artists and like making sure that they were aware of certain things, so on and so forth.
I think
I
I
ended
can
up
remember
having,
sitting in on like a grant writing seminar that you were giving in around that
yeah,
era. Anyways, yeah. So
possibly.
lines up, yeah.
Yeah. And so I ended up leaving the board around 2010 because my grandmother's health was not the best, and so I needed to spend time with her. And from that point on, I was kind of not really working with the organization for a number of years, just for the fact that like I was kind of removed from the music space, just dealing with personal stuff. And since coming back to working like with them, I guess you could say, my whole thing is this: is that I realized, again, as I said before, that this is an organization that their whole mandate is advocating for artists, and they're advocating for every other genre. So why would they not advocate for hip hop?
Right.
The only thing is that as hip hop, we have to understand that if we want to be able to get this organization to advocate on our behalf and utilize their resources and leverage their relationships to create opportunities for us, we have to be we have to be willing to come to the table and talk with them and say, hey, this is what we need,
Yeah.
so on and so forth. Esmahan, who's on their board now, or sorry, who works for them now, who also goes by the same as me, just released a project. She's someone who is part of the hip hop community, so she's been trying to create that bridge as well too, so that we could access those resources. Because when you consider it, like, and this is something that Jinting and I have had conversations with, shouts out to Jinting, over the last year or so, is that hip hop music is one of the most it's the biggest genre in the world right now,
Yeah,
right?
it's been the highest selling form of
And
music for 35 years, whatever. Yeah.
and but for us to be in a province where our music industry association doesn't have a branch or an arm that actually is actively trying to develop the talent here, then we go back to the same issue that we had back in 1993 with the Maximum Definitive, where it's just like we have
And it's not
Moraine,
on the
we have
radio either,
K
right?
Riz,
Yeah.
and that's another thing as well too, because as we see these artists, Moraine, K Riz, Arden, uh, uh, what's his name, Forever Friday, like these guys are kind of like the faces of like Edmonton hip hop, right? And if they don't have an organization like Alberta Music behind them, then a lot of opportunities will be missed, right? And so with the work that I do with them, it's a matter of keeping them in the loop in regards to what's going on, right? And going to them with ideas in the sense of, hey, like, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Like, they now have Black History Month programming that I've been fortunate to be the one that they've actually reached out to. And so I'm helping with that. Like with the Hip Hop 50, we spoke about doing something as well too. And it's still being figured out in regards to whether we can make it happen. But having someone who's actively engaging with the organization allows for hip hop to be represented, because I've seen organizations like Alberta Music, which is a music industry association, create stars. And there's no reason why the resources, the relationships, and the network that they have can't be leveraged to make hip hop artists from our city or from our province
Especially
become stars
because
as
so
well
many
too.
of them are so talented, right? Like
100%,
yeah,
100%.
it's annoyed me my entire life looking around this province wondering why it's the land that hip hop forgot, but it is. So yeah.
But part of it is development, right? And that's something that I think we need to have more conversations about and start putting into practice. What needs to be implemented to make sure that you have, and I think that's one thing that I got to give this new generation credit for. Like a lot of the hip hop artists, like CXtotheworld, he's got a manager. Who else?
I'm talking to CXtotheworld next month too. Shouts to his
don't.
manager. Yeah.
TK Cabral's got a manager. Like there's artists who, even David Maddow, who I mentioned earlier, who works with Eagle Magazine and has Urban Zoo, like he's managing Just Mo. So there's artists who now have managers where it's like, okay, you have managers who obviously need development, professional development, in order for them to better understand how to facilitate their artist career.
Yeah.
But the fact that artists aren't having to wear as many hats as we had to wear back in our days, like the only reason why I became what I became was because of the fact that we didn't have a publicist, we didn't have a marketer, we didn't have someone who's gonna be our radio promoter, we didn't have all these things here. Right. So we had to wear those hats. But in the day and age we're in right now, there are more people with those skills, with those skill sets that artists can actually have access to. But then the artists, while they may not need to necessarily focus on professional development like we had to focus on, they can now focus on artistic development. And the artistic development is not just writing a song, it's a matter of understanding how to perform to an audience. One of the things that we were fortunate to get when we were young was there was a gentleman by the name of Kata Pinnock, and he would actually run us through rehearsal drills. And if we messed up on something, we'd have to go back to the beginning. And this dude was like a traditionalist. Like he's one of the guys, he actually was in the crew with Touch back in the days called Alta State Alliance. And so these guys put us under the same regiment that they went through, in the sense of like, if you are performing, it has to be good. And I remember there were times when we would have shows lined up, and if Kata felt that we weren't ready for the show, he'd pull us from the show. And we're like 14, 15-year-old kids who were just like crushed. But at the same time, though, looking back at it, I understood what he was trying to do.
That's good for the audience. That's probably good for you as an artist to develop more or whatever and be pushed like that or whatever. But yeah, it's good for the show. Like I've seen some openers who probably should have had somebody pull them off there with the long cane from the side of the stage for sure, man. Do you currently, or have you in the past done artist management? Like, what was your relationship with like Moraine and the other dude's name is slipping me right now, and the name of their group is slipping me too. But Moraine and his old group, you know, those guys.
TOA.
TOA. Yeah. were you a manager for them at some point, or kind of like, did you take them under your wing at some point and help kind of guide that, or what was the relationship like there?
So so this is interesting. Dirk Gritty, who doesn't get enough credit for what he did with TOA. And it's not to say that Moreno and those guys don't show him love or anything like that, but I don't think most people are aware of the work that he put into developing them. They were kids, and he literally would go and pick them up every single Saturday, bring them to our studio, and they would be in the studio learning how to record songs, learning how to write songs, learning how to perform, so on and so forth. Like, he really created the same regimen that we had to go through with GUttA is what he implemented with them, which is part of the reason why Moraine is like a great performer now, you know?
It's beautiful. It's full circle back to where we started talking about OGs and handing down knowledge to generation or whatever. That's beautiful, man. And thanks for doing that, because I've enjoyed the music that those guys have been making. Shouts to Moraine, his new album's dope.
But just to give context in regards to my role, I guess you could say, for me, it was a situation of I would be a bigger brother mentoring these guys and giving them a better understanding of the business side of it, where Gritty focused more on the arts development. So a lot of again, when you see these guys on stage, like, that's the DNA of their Gritty, which is also the DNA of GUttA Pinnock. And I'm not sure who did that with GUttA, but maybe that's the beginning of it. But yeah,
I mean, so many, dude, the more biographies I read of artists, the more I realize, and I kind of have a theory where it's like, it might be a 3-generation project to actually make a star. Like, a lot of stars have, their uncle was playing in a band and helped them get into the grant scene or whatever, right? Like, a lot of people have that door in, where now I kind of look at my nephew and I'm like, maybe I should get this kid in the booth. The door might be closed for me, but he's young, he can get out there and do this,
But I think that's a beautiful thing, where it's just like, when I look at it, like, there's certain, and I've had these conversations with Moreno on so many occasions where I'm just like, dude, man, like, you're doing a lot of things that we wanted to do back in the Politic Live days, but we couldn't do them. Right. So I always tell them, like, yo, if there's anything that I can do, because there were people who, and this is something where it's neither here nor there, right? But there are people that could have helped Politic Live elevate in a certain way, but they didn't see the vision. Where for me, I see it like, yo, like, I know where we wanted to go to. I know where we were aiming to go to, but no, we didn't have the resources, nor did we have the knowledge, nor did we have the manpower. So with a lot of these younger artists, when I get behind them, I'm just like, yo, like, I explain to them, like, this is where you could take it to, and this is how I could help you, right?
Totally.
Because I don't have all the answers, but it's one of those things where it's just like, I have enough experience and I have a decent amount of connections, and I can put them on the right path for them to succeed if they're willing to do the work, and it comes down to them, right? And the consistency, once again.
Like, one of the things that I have seen you do is the European tours, and that's something that recently I've seen Moraine was just touring in Europe or whatever. So maybe that type of just kind of even example is helping lay the groundwork for other people to realize that they can do that. But I see more and more independent artists touring Europe. Can you talk a little bit about how that type of thing comes together? Like, how did you end up on your first tour of Europe?
Okay, so Moraine's actually connected to that. It's interesting still, because, like, I'm always looking at other people and I'm inspired by them, right? And sometimes they're not even aware that I'm inspired by what they're doing. So if you go back to the golden era of Edmonton hip hop, Dark Sun Tribe becomes the first Edmonton hip hop act to actually go tour and do a show over in Asia. So they go and play the Asian X Games or whatever. They've got a bunch of shows out there. And it's just like, wow, we're watching that saying, like, how do we do this, right? Fast forward, I'm working on maybe tomorrow, and Alison Kwan from the AFA, she used to be the grant advisor there. Hella cool woman. She's also a huge Ludacris fan, which most people don't know. So her and I would just have conversations. Just about, like, music and just, like, certain things. She's just like, I really feel that the sound you're going for works better in Europe than it does here. And I'm like, I have no idea how to get there. She's like, we'll figure it out, and that's the thing, that's the advice most people give you, is like, figure it out, right? And often it's not a matter of them like not trying to help you, it's a matter of they believe in you enough and they've seen you do enough right things in the past for them to know that you can figure this out, And so Moraine and I would be on the phone all the time talking about like, yo, how do we get over to Europe? And we're looking at all these acts. Like one of the acts that we seen go over to Europe was a cat by the name of Dizzy. He now goes by JD's. Shoot, he's gonna hate me for that. But Dizzy was his rap name at the time, right? And so he was going over to Rotterdam and doing stuff in New School Rules. I'm just like, yo, maybe that's the way in. But we didn't know how to, like, and it just so happened that Moraine and I are like going back and forth trying to figure out how do we get there. And my boy Dio happened to be in town. And Dio, for those who don't know, Defy All Odds, Dwayne Gibson is like in the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest freestyle, right?
Damn.
Hella cool dude.
I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah. So he's in town, and like he's one of those people where he's an OG. He's mentored a lot of artists, and he's created a lot of opportunities for a lot of artists. And so he's in town. He hits me up. He's like, "Yo, let's go for breakfast, right?" And Dio's one of those people where if he hits you up, you don't say, "Oh, I'm busy." You clear your schedule. You make things happen, right? So meet up with him. This is at the Needle Vinyl Tavern. So this is like 2016, 2017 or so, right? And he's like, "Have you ever been to the south of France?" I'm like, "Nah." He's like, "Do you want to go?" I'm like, "Hell yeah." And then so he starts to explain to me these third-party showcases, right? I'm just like, "Oh, deep." He's like, "That is going to be your in," right? And so did everything he told me I was supposed to do, ended up getting a grant to go over there, and Moraine and I end up going. And so that was like our introduction to Europe. And from there, we ended up applying for a festival in South Korea that same year, and we got accepted to play this festival called Zandari Festa. And so all of a sudden we're back out in Asia that year, and then the year after we just started applying to different showcases. And that's one thing that I think a lot of artists are not cognizant of, is the whole fact that you don't necessarily have to have all the connections in the world. There are organizations like Breakout West or Alberta Music who have these showcases that can get you into that market. And once you get into that market, now it's your opportunity to look at what other, this is the anchor. So New School Rules is the anchor. Focus Wales is the anchor.
Yeah.
Sound City in Liverpool is the anchor. The Great Escape in Brighton is the anchor. And then you, from that anchor point, start looking at other shows that you could actually connect with, right? So whether it's doing an open mic, whether it's doing connecting with one of the local venues or whatever the case may be. Fortunately for me, when Dio got me over into Cannes for Midem, which was a festival that I played at, a third-party showcase for Midem, I was able to meet people from the London area. So all of a sudden, they're just like, hey, if you're ever back out in the UK or back out in Europe and you want to show in London, let us know.
And you're like, so get here. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that goes back to what Alison Kwan said, figure it out. So I've now got myself into this place where going to meet them, I'm meeting people from all over Europe, and I'm making these relationships. So then, and they're saying, if you're ever back, hit me up. So then what I do then, get back and then say, okay, how do we get back into there? And once we get back into there, how do we then create a route, right? And that's where the small team that I have, Natalie Myers, like contacting different places, going on different blogs and saying, okay, well, what are the spots to hit up? So then we start routing a tour, and then we start getting into these markets, because I think sometimes people make the process a little bit more daunting than it needs to be. It's a matter of just doing the work. And it may look pretty the first time you do it. It may not look pretty. You could be in a situation where you are literally taking planes, trains, automobiles, buses, but you're getting to all your locations. You're meeting people. You're meeting the person who books for that venue. You're meeting this radio host.
You're shaking hands this guy. And conducting yourself professionally,
exactly.
and giving a good impression to people. And that all goes, again, full circle to where, we were talking earlier, how important that stuff is, right? And, man, like something that I can say for you wholeheartedly is that I've always been able to really appreciate how You do seem to operate on a each one teach one basis. You know, like I said,
Yes.
I've been to a grant writing seminar that you were putting on just to help people out. I know, you know, a lot of different artists have benefited from just working with you and knowing you and being around you on the scene. I think the Edmonton scene as a whole has benefited from you, man. I don't want to take up too much of your time here tonight. There's one or two more questions I kind of ask everybody just because it's a soundbite I like hearing artists say. But can you just tell people what's the best way to support artists that they like in 2023?
Wow. Best way to support artists.
Like if somebody wants to support you, you know, if you want to be specific with yourself or just as a general question, how should people support the music that they like? Because honestly, I feel like with streaming the way it is right now, a lot of people think that like, well, I listen to their stuff on Spotify, but like they don't really, there's no further connection of like, how do you really support an artist in 2023?
Well, I think that sharing is caring, right? And I think that if we can get back to a place where people are super fans of music, where you're finding ways to like, show you an example, okay? 2006, I think it was, we played Canadian Music Week as Politic Live, and we showcased with Shad, and so this is before Shad is like Shad, right? To the point that we ended up doing a remix to Blocko that we ended up getting him on because of the fact that like we were able to connect with him, right? And so this dude puts on a show, and it's an amazing show, and I become a fan instantly because I'm just like, yo, this guy's a dope MC and he's got a great live show, right? Buy a CD, come back to Edmonton. I'm also a campus radio guy. I'm also a guy who knows a lot of people. Yeah. So I start playing his music on campus radio. I start telling people about it, and people are just like, yo, this guy's dope. I'm just like, and his first hip hop show, this is so funny. His first hip hop show that he ever did in Edmonton, because he came to Edmonton on a tour with a rock band, and the show they had him in, it was at Starlight Room. He was like the only hip hop artist on, right?
Yeah.
But getting him an opportunity to perform at Homegrown, right? So that was like the first hip hop.
It all comes back to Homegrown, right? Man.
Yeah, yo, that is the base, the home base, you know. And I mentioned that because of the fact that like the way that I was so moved by his performance, I was then telling everybody about his music. Because I'm like, more people need to hear this. And I think that when we can get back to a place where people aren't just passive listeners or passive fans, they're just like, I really enjoy this artist and I want more people to know about them, and like really just promote them. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, the streaming helps out because it helps the algorithm, so on and so forth. Sharing it allows people to be exposed to it. And then if you're using your Spotify analytics, like for the back end, then you can actually see what markets your music is performing in. Yeah. But the biggest thing is that like, whether it's buying merch, because even I bought a t-shirt from Shad that night, I bought a CD that night, and that goes a long way. But I wasn't just, okay, let me buy this and then it sits there. It's like, I'm going to wear the shirt. I'm going to make sure people are hearing the music.
Tell people about it. Yeah.
Yes. Like, champion, like get behind.
Man, After the Smoke is Clear has me on my super fan shit. Like, you know, I didn't used to know 20 different Canadian hip hop artists. And at this point, like, I'm really genuinely enjoying listening to the new content that drops every week from across the country, because there's so much good music, man. And so,
but you know what's crazy about that?
Do to just push it out to as many years as I can.
Yeah. What's crazy about that is that being in a position as campus radio DJs, we're privy to being exposed to how great Canadian music is.
Yeah.
And most people will hear a song in passing and never have the opportunity to really let that song soak in and appreciate it for what it is. And so we often become fans of these artists because the same way that Drake will get his rotation, so on and so forth, we are the ones who are giving the Liberators rotation. We're the ones who are giving Just Mo, Moraine, whoever the case may be, that rotation. And because of the fact we're digging into the music and actually listening to it attentively, we begin to appreciate the music for what it is and be like, yo, like, this is actually dope. Where most people will hear a song and it'll just kind of be there, you know?
Yeah, man. So I always ask artists to, share the spotlight and put us onto some other artists from their community. I feel like we've named pretty much all of them. I'm joking. I'm sure we've left out people, but we've named a lot of different artists throughout this. So I'm not going to put you on the spot for that one. You've named plenty of different people. Last thing that I always ask, anything else to plug or any shows or tour coming up where people can catch up to you?
Okay, well, I do have a show coming up on September 15th at the Jubilee Auditorium in Edmonton. It is at 7 o'clock. It is through an organization called Skool, where this is going to be the Jew Fest. So I'll be performing with the live band, got some special guests. After that, it's I guess maybe a quiet time as we get ready for the album. But just look out for that and the new single, which is dropping.
Sounds like a lot
Night
to me.
Shift.
New single, show coming up in the next month, album coming up soon. Yeah.
And some documentaries as well too. So it's a lot.
Oh, I guess that's something I wanted to ask too, is I always see dope documentaries like yours drop and then you can't find them anywhere to stream. Where can people actually see it? Where should, can they buy it? How do I see it? I want to see it, myself included.
So Untouchable Crew is actually available on TELUS Optic, but you have to have TELUS TV or TELUS Optic to get it, and you can watch it through their on-demand programming.
Okay.
If you go to Story Hive's YouTube channel, you could also see the documentary there as well too.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that makes things easy. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you coming by and doing this, man. Once again, just thanks, and keep doing what you're doing. I love to sit back and watch everybody make dope art, man.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. This has been a pleasant night. We went over by 28 minutes, but I didn't mind.
We've been at it for a while, but I'll let you get off the mic. It sounds like you need a drink here. So,
yes.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you going overtime with me, though. Thanks, man.
No, you're welcome. Thank you. All right. Peace.
All right. So thanks, everybody, for rocking with us there. If you don't know, After the Smoke is Clear is the show that I talked about, mixcloud.com/Doobyis. There's a new episode from Thursday last week, and there should be a new one for Thursday this week. I think Baggy Lean's even going to do cuts on it before then. If he doesn't, I'll put it together myself. But yeah, we have interviews going on here on this Twitch every Tuesday coming up. September 5th next week. Just mute that. Thanks for the follow there, folks. Appreciate that all the time. Hit follow, hit sub if you don't want ads. If you've got Amazon Prime, you can sub for free by linking your Amazon Prime to your Twitch account. But yeah, I was going to say, coming up for Fly in Formation in the following weeks, September 5th, I'm talking to Winnipeg-based producer Frost Gamble, who is dope as hell. Looking forward to that. He actually said on his Instagram he has stories to share that he's saving for that podcast, so I'm looking forward to it. September 12th, I'm talking to Toronto-based longtime MC Mindbender, as well as the mighty Rhino, who is one of my favorite voices in Canadian hip-hop. I just can't put it any other way. That guy is dope as hell. And September 19th, I'm talking to at least straight GUttA. I'm hoping that Old Skool will also be able to join us. And then... yeah, into late September, I was talking to Kryple, and I think Kryple is actually going to be October 3rd, tentatively, and CXtotheworld will be September, I don't know, the last Tuesday in September 26th or so. But yeah, thanks for checking in, everybody. Doobyis.com is the hub. I make posts about every @sick episode where I break down the songs I played, tell you what I thought of them. I'm on here gaming and stuff like that. If you're bored through the days of the week, come by, say hi. Appreciate y'all. Peace.